Hey everybody, I'm Seb Pearson and welcome to Empower Conditioning's first Technique Tuesday. Today we're going to be talking about the hip hinge. So most people think that the hip hinge is a fairly simple or not so important movement, but in fact it's actually crucial to a lot of exercises we do, including deadlifts, kettlebell swings, and a huge number of plyometrics that are involved in training and in sports. So issues with the hip hinge start to arise with young athletes and individuals that are new to training, because the tendency is for when attempting the hip hinge is to actually start to bend the knees, and unfortunately this results in more of a squatting pattern rather than an actual hip hinge. So what I want to show you is a diagram by Zach Long, the barbell physio, which illustrates this point very simply. So as you see here, we have two versions, the hip hinge and the squat, and as you can see below it says, with the hip hinge we have a maximum amount of hip flexion and a minimum amount of knee flexion, whereas the squat is maximum hip flexion as well as maximum knee flexion. And as you can see, the upper body in this diagram is much closer to parallel with the floor. The knees are at a very slight angle, whereas compared to the squat, a greater angle of the upper body and a greater angle at the knees. So the hip hinge is a beneficial movement because it allows us to load into our hips and utilize the powerful muscles of our posterior chain. Whereas a squat puts much more emphasis on the knee extensor muscles, the quadriceps, to make the movements happen. So the hip hinge seems pretty simple, but it's actually a lot more complicated than it seems. So what we have here is a series of progressions that we like to use to coach our athletes on the hip hinge. So the first one we have is the hip hinge wall tap. So you're going to get your athlete to start off standing up against the wall, then they're going to move one of their feet forward about half the length of their other foot, and then bring the other one up to match. Okay, then they're going to stand tall with a very slight bend in their knees and their chin slightly tucked to keep the spine neutral. Once they've achieved this position, they're then going to try and reach back and touch their butt against the wall. Maintaining a neutral spine through the whole movement. Once they touch their butt on the wall, they're going to squeeze forward back to the standing position. As they master the movement, they can move further out from the wall and continue with that, again, allowing the chest and upper body to become more parallel with the floor. So what we have for you next is the dowel hip hinge. So all you need is a dowel or a broomstick, whatever you have lying around. You're going to get your athlete to take the dowel. You can hold one hand at the top, slightly above his head, and hold on to the dowel at the bottom, slightly below or above his butt. You're trying to look for 3 points of contact here. We're looking to have contact at the back of the head, between the shoulder blades, and the tailbone. Okay, this means that the spine and everything is in line and we're in a good position for the hip hinge. So the object now is, again, with a slight bend in the knees, right, to allow the chest to come forward and the butt to go back to the wall behind while maintaining all 3 points of contact through the entire movement. Only go as deep as you can while maintaining contact. If you lose contact, try and maintain it again or come back to the start and begin again. This one's for the coaches. So when going through this, there's certain things you need to watch out for. The first one, right, is when we start to lose contact with the points of the dowel, that's when we know we're not in the right position. If the head loses contact with the dowel, that means the spine and the neck are no longer neutral, okay, and he's starting to look down towards the ground. The second one is if he starts to look up, we lose contact with the bar between the shoulder blades, and again, the spine is no longer neutral. Again, finally, as he's going down, if his back starts to round, we'll lose contact with the dowel and the tailbone. And then finally, if there's too much flex in the knees, again, we lose contact with the tailbone as the pelvis tilts. So once you've mastered the dowel hip hinge, you can start to think about loading your athletes. What we like to do is the cable pull through. This is a great exercise because it allows us to weight the posterior chain without actually having to load the spine, and allows us to train the hip hinge really well. So you're going to get your athlete to start off straddling the cable, preferably using a rope, but if you have a handle, that's fine, right? In a good safe position, they're going to take a few steps out so that the weight stack, okay, has enough distance to travel without clinking together. Okay, same as before, the athlete's going to start off nice and tall, slight bend in the knees, and they're just going to allow the weight to pull their arms through their legs, right? Keeping a neutral spine, that chin slightly tucked. They're going to go down to a point where they feel tension in their hamstrings and their glutes. Then they're going to squeeze, pushing their hips against their arms to come back to the standing position. Okay? It's very important that we don't allow the athlete to raise their arms as they come up, but simply just push the arms forward with the hips. The wall tap, the dowel, and the cable pull through are the three progressions that we like to use to coach our athletes through the hip hinge. Once you master these movements, you can move on to more complex exercises like the RDL. The deadlift. Kettlebell swing. And the broad jump. Thanks a lot for watching. Stay tuned for next week's Technique Tuesday, and don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Instagram.